Welcome to the April Smart Grid Educational Series seminar. This is Irfan Ibrahim, your moderator, and I am pleased to welcome you. We are all gathered here at the Underwriters Laboratories in Fremont, California, and Barbara Judge, who is here in the room, is our host. Thank you, Barbara, for welcoming us and sharing this wonderful meal with all of us. I see a lot of happy faces. So everyone has had their carbohydrate intake for the afternoon. And so John will have to be very, very interesting and stimulating, and so will you, Marty and Matt, in order to keep everyone awake. I had mentioned earlier when I started this town hall meeting that I had dedicated this meeting to the memory of Resna Heinz. And some of you were not online at the time, but she passed away a few weeks ago in California, and she was married to my friend and colleague Matthias Heinz of TUV Rhineland. The reason why I dedicated this presentation to Resna is because of the work that she has done in bringing energy, clean energy, to underprivileged people worldwide. She was quite the world traveler, and she did a lot of good work in developing countries. And for someone to grow up in a small country like Montenegro and come to the US and then feel the need to go help needy people worldwide, I think is quite an accomplishment. And so I wanted to just recognize Resna and share the grief with Matthias in the loss of his spouse. And if you get a chance, go to Solar for Peace. It's a very good website and talks about how this organization is bringing cutting-edge renewable energy into the hands of the most underserved people globally. And it allows them to have clean water. It allows them to have some lighting in their home. It allows them some basic necessities that are not available to them when they're based on diesel fuel or kerosene or other things with unreliable supply. So please keep Resna in your thoughts and prayers. So I wanted to now get into the presentation for the Green Button Initiative. A lot of you have heard about the Green Button Initiative. It is being promoted as a way, and the government is very strongly helping in putting the word out there as a way of making the energy information that is coming out of all of this smart grid infrastructure that is relevant to customers to be made available to customers. And it's all about creating well-defined interfaces on which not only utilities and energy service companies, but consumers and other third parties can participate in the energy market, if you may. And John and Marty and Matt are all very much involved in this initiative, and I'm really, really happy that they have agreed, and I understand that there's some work going on with UL, and this is why we came here. And I'm actually wearing a green T-shirt. It's a People Power T-shirt today. And the reason why I'm wearing it is in anticipation of our webcast in 2 weeks on April 24th. But it's all about that customer engagement. That's what the presentation in a couple of weeks is going to be. But to set that discussion, I think this presentation by John is going to be that important, and Marty and Matt, to explain what is happening at the national level, what can vendors expect, and what can utilities expect, and ultimately what can customers expect. So with that, I would like to now pass the presentation ball to John Teeter. John is a Presidential Innovation Fellow, and he is working on the Green Button Initiative at NIST. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Irfan. And thank you, Barbara and UL, for hosting this, and Irfan for continuing your Smart Grid educational series as we've, through the years, developed our understanding of what possibilities exist in our new and transformed energy infrastructure. Just to verify, you guys can see my screen now?
As Obama says, yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm sorry to have brought you back off mute. My name is John Teeter. I am a Presidential Innovation Fellow assigned to the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The Presidential Innovation Program is a program that brings people from the private sector to the public sector for a period of 12 months to help inspire innovation and look for opportunities to help move our collective government forward. With us on the call today is Matt Thial, Presidential Innovation Fellow with Department of Energy. Matt comes to the fellow program from Intel Corporation, where he was also as a past board member of the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel. And I should also say, in full disclosure, I'm on a 12-month leave of absence as Chief Scientist at People Power. With us today also is Marty Burns, who's the technical champion for the Green Button program, contracted through NIST, and is really the soul and behind the protocols that are within the Green Button standard. I kind of frame this broadly. The federal government really has interest in data access. We realize that the deep information that's known within the government is not really accessible for the engagement by the people that live in the country, and so it's been an inhibition with respect to bringing new products and services to the market. There are two large projects, the Open Data Initiative, which is primarily hosted up on GitHub, and along with that, data.gov. These bring massive amounts of data to the public access through APIs, through services. Examples are the Federal Registry, data.gov, as I mentioned, but also the Energy Information Agency, which has 94,000 odd databases of all of our resource usage over the past 50 or 60 years. So all of this information is coming forward. It's becoming available. The other part of the Open Data, or the Data Access Initiative, is the MyData Initiative, and it's focused more on how consumers with secure access can gain access to the information that is really theirs. It's either about them, or it's about their lifestyles or their usage or their education. The Blue Button Initiative was first led within the health sector and is driving forward the electronic data records. And the Green Button Initiative in the energy and resource sector, moving beyond just electricity, which is what we were first talking about, into gas and water and air quality, and then education as well. So with the framing of these large data initiatives, I want to pass the baton over to Matt, who's going to take us through kind of the commitments that we're seeing at the federal level. Matt?
Okay, John, thanks very much. Perhaps, I'm not sure who is advancing the slides, but if you could advance to slide number 3, please.
Got it, that would be me.
Okay. Let me wait for a second until it at least flips on my screen here, John. Can others, on my screen at least, it's still on the cover slide.
John, all you have to do is move the horizontal arrows where it says 01 right now at the top in the middle. You just move that and that'll advance the slide to the next one. You are the presenter right now.
Is it your slides I'm presenting and not mine? I see.
There are two horizontal arrows.
Oh yeah, I get it. No, I thought I was showing my desktop. My total apology for that. You got it, Matt.
They missed your great number 2 slide there, John, but we'll get that to him another time. So as John said, though, the administration is strongly supportive of making people's energy usage information and energy data available to them, with the belief that if we're able to give this information to the public and to businesses in the U.S., that this will allow them to make better energy choices, better energy decisions based on the information that is available to them now as a result of the Open Data Initiative and the MyData Initiative that John just talked about just a minute ago. The administration has also been very strongly supportive of the Green Button Initiative. The Green Button Initiative kicked off in late 2011 with a White House call to action that I'll talk about in a little while in more detail. But the call to action for the White House was basically for the industry to standardize on a single data format for energy usage and energy reporting information. And the belief was that by doing so, we could have similar results to some past examples where the government has done this. For example, with GPS, which had been created primarily for military applications by the government, when the government made GPS data available to the public, now entrepreneurs, innovators, companies have developed all kinds of GPS applications, and you find it in pretty much every car, every cell phone, in all kinds of products, including even dog tags and other things like that to help you find your dog if it's lost. So it's just permeated society and it's become a tremendous success. Another example is when the government opened up weather information, which previously had been available to the government as part of its weather monitoring systems. But today they've opened up the National Weather Service data to the public, and now when you watch your nightly news or when you open your weather app on your cell phone, you can see the weather forecast for the next 5 days or 10 days with much better accuracy than ever before. So the thinking is the same with the energy usage information. If we make people's energy usage information available to businesses and to consumers, they'll be able to have that information, make better choices, but also will create a whole bunch of new jobs and will create a whole new bunch of applications that will ultimately benefit everybody in the country. In addition to sort of strong support for Green Button, when the initiative got kicked off in November of 2011, I believe, the government has also continues to be strongly supportive of Green Button today. Back in June of last year, so a little less than a year ago, as part of the Climate Action Plan, there was inclusion of Green Button in the Climate Action Plan, and it said specifically that the federal facilities will start to increase their ability to manage energy consumption, reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and meet sustainability goals. That was one of the areas. A second area that the White House and the government has been supportive of Green Button came in the form of a presidential memorandum that was issued on December 5th of last year. In this presidential memorandum, there were certain directives from the president to the agencies in the federal government. These included a requirement that the General Services Administration create a pilot program for Connect MyData to pilot Green Button use in federal facilities. A second requirement from the president to the federal agencies is that the EPA Portfolio Manager product incorporate Green Button. And then third, that the Federal Energy Management Program Office, this is a part of the Department of Energy that monitors energy legislation, presidential memorandums, and executive orders, that they issue guidance to all of the other federal agencies to adopt Green Button once the pilot is completed by the General Services Administration. So John and I have been working with GSA for quite a while on the pilot, and we'll be announcing some results of that in the near future. Thirdly, the Department of Energy continues to be supportive of the Green Button initiative. We currently are running a contest called Apps for Energy, where the Department of Energy is awarding $100,000 in prizes to entrepreneurs, businesses, and just individual software developers to develop new applications and products based on the Green Button standard. You can get information about the Apps for Energy contest at energychallenge.energy.gov. Let's go to the next slide, John. Thank you. So in addition to the President issuing presidential memorandums, inclusion of Green Button in the Climate Action Plan and Department of Energy's Apps for Energy contest, the White House also brought in a number of Presidential Innovation Fellows, John Teeter, as he said at NIST, myself detailed to the Department of Energy, and also Charles Worthington to continue to work with internal champions like Marty Burns, who you'll hear from in just a minute, Chris Irwin at the Department of Energy, Dave Woolman at the National Institute of Standards, as well as a group of people in the White House itself that are promoting the Green Button standard. One of the things the Presidential Innovation Fellows did when we first arrived is to take 3 high-level goals, major goals that we wanted to accomplish during the 12 months that we're here. The first goal was to double the number of consumers, double the number of Americans that have access to their Green Button data in the year that we're here. That's goal number 1. Goal number 2 was to improve the consistency of the data as Green Button continued to get adopted across the country. So John and I have been working on a testing and certification program. John actually does most of the work here, and I support him where I can. So we are putting together a testing and certification program so that as companies develop new apps, products, and services, that we have the ability to test the packets and test the products to make sure that they work and that the data is reliable and is consistent across different third-party apps, across different utilities, and across different parts of the country. Thirdly, we also took a high-level deliverable to make sure that the inclusion of Green Button as part of the Climate Action Plan and the directives from the Presidential's memorandum were carried out. So we're working very closely with GSA, with Federal Energy Management Program Office, and also with EPA to make sure the Green Button is used throughout the federal government and that a directive is issued to all the federal agencies during our time here. In the future, we'll continue to work with other parts of the government to make sure the Green Button is continued to be supported, as well as work with third parties in the industry to develop products. Green Button, as I said, originated and started really a couple of years ago, a little over 2 years ago now, in late 2011. And during that time, we've made tremendous progress. Today, Green Button is available to over 42 million Americans. We have commitments for a total of 59 million. So in addition to the 42 million people that customers that already have access to Green Button, we have another 17 million customers that utilities are in the process of implementing Green Button now, which will be available to people shortly. In addition, we work very closely with the Canadians, especially up in Ontario, to help them deploy Green Button throughout the province of Ontario. Today, over 60% of Ontarian residents have access to Green Button data, so that is a total of about 2.6 million customers in Ontario. We're also talking to other provinces, including British Columbia and other parts of Canada, as well as people in the European Union, in India, and in other countries across the world. As a result of a collaboration really between the White House, the National Institute of Standards, Department of Energy, SGIP, regulators, utilities, NASB, we've seen a tremendous amount of adoption throughout the country. You can see that on the map that's shown on the top right side of this slide. While much of the country is still not green, we believe with the additional commitments we have, as well as the Federal Energy Management Program Office giving a directive to federal agencies to adopt Green Button, that much of the rest of the country will go green in the near future. As an example of sort of the power of the Federal Energy Management Program directive to agencies, GSA alone, just one of 35 federal agencies that will get a directive from FEMP, is serviced by over 400 different utilities. So as you can see, if you expand that from one agency with 400 utilities supporting them to all 35 agencies, you can see that the potential to turn the country entirely green is not only a real possibility, but we believe well within our grasp. Let's go to the next slide, John. Next slide is really just much of what I just told you a few minutes ago. Again, Green Button launched in 2011. At that time, there were no customers at all that had access to Green Button. But as a result of the collaboration amongst all the different partners that I just mentioned a minute ago, by early 2012, we had increased adoption of Green Button from 0 to 12 million customers across the country. Within a year, we had gone up to 26 million customers. Earlier this year, we announced that 42 million customers have access. Again, we have a pipeline to another 17 million via commitments that are in place to a total of 59 million customers. So in the near future, we will make another announcement about some of the additional utilities that have successfully completed their adoption and implementation of Green Button. Let's go to slide number 6. So Green Button, just very quickly, John will go into this a lot more detail than me, is really 2 standards rolled into one. One is called Download MyData. This gives customers the abilities to log on to their utility website and download all their energy usage information, and therefore it's called Download MyData. A second version of the standard is called Connect MyData. This is essentially the machine-to-machine version of the Green Button standard that allows a customer to give access to a third party to their energy usage information so that that third party can analyze the energy usage information and then make specific recommendations to customers. So this might be an app on your cell phone where you give the right to a third party to download your Green Button data, analyze it, and then give you helpful reminders about you're using excess amounts of electricity, you might want to cut it, rates are going to increase at a particular time, any of a number of other sort of helpful tips that will help people reduce their energy use. Or it might be a web portal where somebody can log in, they can look at their energy usage a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, and then also have detailed information on how to cut their usage. Green Button is a standard that can be used in a wide variety of different applications. We see entrepreneurs that are already developing mobile applications and web portal-based applications, as I said just a minute ago. We see many companies in the HVAC market that are looking at using it to try to reduce energy consumption during peak demand periods. We have many universities, including UCLA, where we just recently did a Green Button hackathon that are extremely interested and are using Green Button for their particular uses. And we have a number of different third-party and other applications companies that are using it for all kinds of things, from helping you decide which home to buy when you're trying to purchase a home using MLS based on previous energy usage and energy consumption history, or solar manufacturers that are pricing a solar panel that might go on your house, and they would like to determine your return on investment to try to help you make a decision on purchasing your property. So on that particular sort of topic, here's a picture of a house that I own out on Martha's Vineyard. As you can see, it's nowhere as elaborate as what President Obama stays at when he goes to Martha's Vineyard in the summer, or what President Clinton previously had used, but it's not a bad little house. In this case, I purchased this house about 2 years ago now or so, and one of the first things that I did is I called a solar company to give me a quote on evaluating the house. The house has 100% electric heat, and in Massachusetts, that means you have a huge bill. They asked me at the time if I had my previous energy usage information, which I did not. So they gave me a quote for this house based on the average electric usage of houses in the state of Massachusetts. And then they gave me a payback period, or a time to pay off the solar panels, based on the average use in the state of Massachusetts for a normal home. After I purchased the home, NSTAR came along. They adopted the Green Button standard, and for the first time, they made Green Button available, data available to myself as well as millions of other people in the New England region. When I actually went in and downloaded my energy usage information for that house for previous years, and then compared that to the estimate that the solar company had given me based on the average house in Massachusetts, it turned out, because I had 100% electric heat in my house, that my usage, my energy usage was roughly double what it was for the average house in the state of Massachusetts. So as a result, my energy usage was twice as high using electric heat, but it also meant that my payback period, if I went to solar, was roughly half what the solar company that was trying to sell me the panels actually thought it was. So as you can see in this case, for me as a consumer, there's tremendous amount of benefit to the Green Button standard, because it allowed me to be able to understand my energy usage, be able to compare that to the quote the solar company gave me, and then make a better decision. But it was also very valuable to the solar company, because they were able to, they would be able in the future to be able to give a much better return on investment and payback period for myself. In shifting gears in the District of Columbia, where they have extensive programs to try to reduce energy use, Pepco, the local utility here in Washington, where Marty and John and I are located these days, is in the process now of implementing the Connect MyData standard to support the DC Government Services Building Efficiency Benchmarking Program using BuildSmartDC.com dashboards. There are a number of benefits in the District of Columbia as well as in other parts of the country to implementing the Connect MyData standard. This gives them the ability to do better return on investment analyses of their energy portfolio, better ability to manage their properties, and also better decision-making capabilities throughout the district. When you look at the fact that 40% of the energy used by consumers and 75% of the electricity used by consumers is as a result of the buildings, you can see that this is low-hanging fruit. Being able to have Connect MyData, being able to allow a third party to use that data, download it, evaluate it, and come back with recommendations based on specific buildings that are already in place is a tremendous benefit. So in the future, Pepco will be making more announcements about their Connect MyData program and what the benefits are of that particular program. Going on to the next slide, slide number 11, I believe. Yeah, slide number 11. Department of Energy has a program called the American Energy Data Program, Challenge rather. This kicked off in the fourth quarter of last year. It's been running since then. As I mentioned, there's an Apps for Energy contest right now that if you go to energychallenge.energy.gov, you can learn more about. There will be a third and a fourth challenge that will take place from April through June, which will challenge the American public to look at the data the Department of Energy is making available to the people and to entrepreneurs and to companies, and ask them to tell us how that energy usage information and that data can be better used. So this may be the formats that the data is presented in, it may be how often the data is made available, it may be specific data sets that the public wants to see but still doesn't see. We're challenging the public to tell us what kinds of data do you need to create newer products, new services, new mobile applications that benefit the people. And then in the fourth challenge, which will run from July till October, we're going to ask the public to visualize energy for the next 100 years. So the grid, as we all know, through the smart grid educational system that we're presenting here today, has been in place for now a good 100 years. So we're asking the public to look at energy for the next 100 years, and what do you think will serve the people best when population is increasing, global warming is occurring, other climate and energy challenges are happening. And for providing the best ideas to the contest, people will be eligible to earn prizes and earn money based on the best ideas that are submitted. Again, the contest can be found at energychallenge.energy.gov. Let's go to the next slide. So just in summary, before I turn it over to John or Marty, Green Button really has come a long way in a very short period of time, from no customers having availability about 2 years ago, now to commitments for 59 million customers, which equates to over 100 million Americans very shortly will have access to their Green Button data. With the Federal Energy Management Program Office and the federal government driving Green Button into federal facilities, we believe much of the country will have Green Button within the next year or so. So now we're focused on making sure that the consistency of the data occurs via the testing and certification program, that there's full interoperability between third-party products, web portals, utility data, and other companies and people that are using Green Button data, and then making sure that Green Button scales and that all of the tools are necessary to make Green Button a success as the Green Button standard continues to expand across the country. So with that said, I will turn it over to John or Marty to continue from here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt, and it'll be John. As Matt kind of outlined, we've made great strides in bringing the capabilities to the market. So there are many people through their utilities that directly have this information available. It was rolled out over a period of 4 years, and it's still being rolled out. We're kind of on the cusp of the next wave of that. And we're really stretching for these two top items, the consistency and the interoperability of this data, and that will allow the scaling to the market. This is a slide that came out of the smart grid effort that NIST led over the past 7 years. It identifies the 7 domains of our current electrical grid, but it has focus on the customer domain, because it's in the customer domain that most of the information relative to Green Button is foreseen to have value. The discussion we had at the town hall meeting covered all of these domains. What's our future with respect to how these elements will interact? Part of that, though, is really driven by what information is available, and by focusing on the information that is closest to the customer, the interval data that's metering their usage. It's felt that we can have the highest leverage. So this is the beginning of the information iceberg, the tip of that great mass of data that's floating in the water as we move forward. Within that customer space, we see all sorts of opportunities, but we generalize with respect to Green Button into 3 roles. Speaking now to the technology, we have people that have the data, that maintain it, the custodians of the data. We have people that would like to use that data, the third party, to provide new services and use that data in innovative ways. And then we have the retail customer, who is in the end, the owner of that data, the person whose data it really is. There are, within these 3 players, the opportunity to move the data in many ways. The red line identifies the low-hanging fruit and is the mass of utilities, the gross number of utilities that Matt identified with 42 million customers available. Most of those are download MyData customers, because it was very easy to change the web portals that were being provided by most utilities and have them generate a standard format download file. That enabled the broad spread of Green Button over the past 4 years. The real advantage of Green Button, though, we feel, is in machine-to-machine communications, where we actually connect the data custodian to the third party with the approval of the retail customer and allow the data to flow very easily in an automated way without having to burden the customer with those daily transactions. We started the information model that's underneath the Green Button through the North American Energy Standards Board Energy Services Provider Interface, aka Green Button. This information model identifies the abstractions within the Green Button data that are used to capture the raw interval data and put it forth between interoperable partners in a structured way so that it can be used in analytic effect. Now, that raw information model did not necessarily provide scaling. We chose to wrap that information model into a format that is widely available in the internet as we know it today, the Atom publishing feed, and allow interval usage information to be published and subscribed using industry standard or internet standard mechanisms. So we take a normal subscription, like you'd have a subscription to your news feed from Google. We wrap that around the interval data and the usage information of the Green Button standard. We've wrapped all of that into a technology stack, which is now available to help developers of the Green Button as they roll out the Connect MyData to test their implementations, to get input with respect to design goals and subtleties of the design that might be useful in speeding them to market. This is an interactive site. It's at services.greenbuttondata.org. It contains developers' guides, sample data from many demographic types. Generally, this is 1-year data, maybe 15-minute data. There's also some 5-minute data from large commercial buildings. There's an API testbed, which allows programmers to make RESTful API calls into an operable sandbox, which implement the data custodian and third parties. This is available and has been used in the Apps for Internet Challenge that Matt mentioned. over the second phase of the Energy Data Challenge. And we look to this to be used in real deployments in the near term as we move forward. So that's a very quick overview of the green button technology. With that, I'd like to pass the baton on to Marty Burns so we can talk about really this consistency and interoperability element. Marty?
Thanks, John. And Irfan, good to speak to all of you. And people understand inherently that standards are important, but standards themselves do not produce interoperability. And the reason for that is because standards are a piece of paper developed in a consensus process by an organization that administers that process. But somebody comes along and says, I implemented the standard. And who says that you implemented the standard correctly? How many different interpretations of a document can there be? So the point of the argument is that you need an organization who wants to stand behind the service mark and propose a test that defines what interoperability means. So not that there's a million ways to interpret the standard. Here is one way to interpret the standard, and here's a test that implements that interpretation. So typically what happens in standard certification is that a users group takes on the task of defining the test, causing the test to be administered, and administers the mark. And a good example that we're probably all familiar with is in Wi-Fi network communications on your laptop. The standard underlying Wi-Fi is done by the IEEE 802.11, and yet that's not what defines the interoperability. It's the Wi-Fi Alliance that created an interoperability test and brand logo that means that anything that's got that Wi-Fi sticker on it, Wi-Fi Alliance sticker on it, is going to work. It's going to be interoperable. So enter UCAIUG, which is an organization that's been around for a number of years now. It was originally founded by the Electric Power Research Institute, as it realized when it developed some of the early precursors of SIM and 61850 in the late 90s that there was a need for a users group to move forward the applications of standards within the electric power system. So this slide shows the structure of UCAIUG. And what I want to highlight here is that in the lavender, you can see that there is a component of testing and certification that UCAIUG has been bringing forward over the years. And what you can see in that picture is that there's SIM 61850 and green and now green button, and these are three of the most important standards in the smart grid. So there's quite a capability being built here. And on the next slide, John, please, you'll see that, and John had mentioned that this whole green button initiative has had a parallel of support and engagement from NIST's efforts in the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel over the recent years. And one of the key dimensions of NIST's goals in fostering interoperability in the smart grid was the developing of some standards on testing and standard practices on testing and certification. So you see on this architecture of UCAIUG's ITCA, Interoperability Testing and Certification Authority architecture, is the SGIP's design of the IPRM document. And in essence, that collects best practices for testing and certification programs. In the non-highlighted area, the bluish areas down low in the middle, the slide here, you'll see that there are some international standards on best practices of various aspects of testing and certification. So if you look at this overall architecture, at the top you have the standard. So remember the standard is essential, but in and of itself not sufficient to produce interoperability. So we have the standard. And then we have the domain of UCAIUG, which has the Open ADE Task Force, Open Automated Data Exchange. And Open ADE Task Force developed the requirements for Green Button, provided these requirements to the NASB standards process, and helped shepherd those requirements into an implementation of a standard, and has, over the past year, worked to develop the testing and certification requirements for Green Button. And then you'll see that we're thrilled to be involved with Underwriters Labs, and you all are at their offices. A blue chip name in testing and certification, and they play a critical role as a certification body and test lab for the embryonic Green Button testing and certification capability. So what you see here is the crude, gross process flow chart on how testing and certification is going to work. And Green Button is sort of the prototype for processes like this that UCAIUG and its partners are going to be doing going forward. And Green Button Download MyData is the first out of the chute according to this process. So we produced a set of artifacts and assembled the parties who will participate in the testing process. We have some initial vendors that John has secured who want to participate as test targets to first through the chute to be certified. And we created some documentation and forms, and we're ready to begin doing the actual first, we're calling them dry run tests. And why do we call them dry run tests? Because we had a theory. We put our theory of testing Green Button into practice. The technical experts on Green Button and the domain experts on its use. Stay on that slide a moment longer, thanks. Came together and we produced a testing specification, test procedures, test methods, and now we're going to try them out on some real applications and feedback our lessons learned. And after we finish these steps 5, 6, 7, 8, we'll have our initial crop of certified implementations, and we'll be able to refine our process so that we're ready to go officially live and be doing this on an ongoing and regular basis. Thanks, John. Next slide. So this slide summarizes some of the key artifacts that we created for testing and certification. You can see that you need both technology and you need process. And just another word about this whole ITCA thing. It's an awful lot like ISO 9000, if you're familiar with that, and that is that it doesn't tell you what to do. It tells you what kind of processes you need in place to have a quality process. And this ITCA and the ISO standards and the IPRM, they're in essence like those ISO 9000 standards in describing the best practices on how to set up a testing and certification program. And we've done that. So we've produced these artifacts. They're all available online in open view. And on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how we actually did the semantic content of the testing and certification. So if you looked at the titles of the artifacts and you looked at that, slide showing the architecture, everything in those are applicable to whatever standard you're testing to, whatever you're testing to. So how did we get to the green button certification test? Well, we started off with, remember I said that standards are necessary but not sufficient to produce interoperability. You have to produce at first an interpretation of the standard, and that's what we call implementation agreements. In other words, here's the standard, this is what it says. What does that mean to users, applications of the standard? So we started off by developing these implementation agreements in the OpenADE task force. So we the requirements for SB and Green Button started there, and now the testing and certification process is being developed there. And from these application profiles, which are the use cases for the testing and certification of the standard, we developed these implementation agreements that included standards updates and fixes and specific interpretations of things that weren't obvious. Okay. And from that, we derived a set of test requirements, a requirements breakdown, and how we would verify these requirements, and then what test procedures would be required to perform the verifications of the requirements for testing. And then we developed software that implemented these test procedures for Green Button Download My Data and Green Button Connect My Data. And Green Button Download My Data is completed, and we're dry running that testing and certification process from end to end in the coming days. And then Green Button Connect My Data, there are some things major changes in the internet and how you protect third-party access to customer data that caused that to take a little bit longer to specify, to develop the implementation agreements on Connect My Data. And we hope to finish the equivalent of what we have to Download My Data by this fall. And then finally, UCAIUG and its partners have set up the certification mark process and coordinated with certification bodies. And these four tracks combine to produce Green Button implementations that are certified and interoperable. So that's how we did it. Next slide. Okay. So just a little bit about what these things look like. We have a working document called the Green Button Test Plan, and it has various components shown on this slide. And it starts off with the application profiles. The Green Button Download My Data is the obvious profile. And we described it, it's sort of like a mini use case, but it's not highly elaborated, just enough to inspire the testing requirements for it. And then we realized that, there are a lot of different dimensions to Green Button data. There's the obvious one, which is I want to get hourly kilowatt-hour data for 13 months. But there are more, because there's gas, there are received and delivered. You were talking earlier about net metering. So there are a lot of different dimensions to Green Button data, and all implementations won't necessarily support all these dimensions. So we created function blocks that are groupings of requirements, such that a testee could assert, well, I do function block 1, 4, and 5, and that's what I want to be certified for, and that's basic watt-hour interval metering. Okay, and then so you start off with application profiles, and you go to function blocks, and then within each function block, we enumerated test requirements. And the way this is designed is that if you meet all the test requirements within a function block, you pass the function block. So I say I do function block 2. If I have a test for every test requirement within that function block and my implementation passes it, I pass the function block. So it's very structurally broken down, and it makes testing straightforward and easy. There's no interpretation. It's yes or no, pass or fail. So this is a summary of the application profiles that we have. Green button, download my data, connect my data. Smart devices acquire green button data from data custodians. So, you know, you have in the room, I think, O-Power. They provide benefits to a large customer base. They have big computers in the cloud. But there are smaller third-party applications for green button data, like, for example, a thermostat. And the requirements to perform that service are different than what an O-Power needs. So the next one, third party acquires large batches of, am I running out of time? You rushing me along? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Okay. So these are the different application profiles. On the next slide, we have a summary of the function blocks that we derive from these various application profiles. So different implementations of download my data or connect my data will use different subsets of these data function blocks. Okay, next slide. So then we produced a matrix of required and optional, mandatory and optional function blocks for these various application profiles. And this is all in the test plan document. And then once we built all the requirements, and we then built some software that automated the testing of these function blocks. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that online at www.greenbuttondata.org, we have an online self-test analysis where anybody can take a green button, download my data file, and test it. And in fact, we use this same capability in the download my data certification test. So you select a common scope, which is the set of function blocks that you want to support, and you can edit the checkbox. So if I also do gas and I also add cost, I would check those boxes, and then I can check the box, download the test results. I can drop my green button data file on the area 5 there, and it will perform the analysis using the test tools we built, which are open source, and we'll produce a report that can be downloaded. So if you look at the next slide, it shows the comparison between a successful report and an unsuccessful report. John had shown you earlier the Atom publishing syndication format by which green button data is packaged up and shipped over the internet. And one of the things he showed you before that was a class diagram showing the hierarchical relationship of green button data. And if you looked at that slide, you'd see that the data is hierarchical and structured with a lot of zero to many relationships. But the Atom syndication format is linear. It's just a sequence of components. In order to understand how those components match up to form the structured hierarchical nature that they really have, there are links between, link entries between the Atom publishing things. If you don't have those links right, if it's a complex green button file, there's no way to match up an interval data with what its data type is. So, you know, if you have received and delivered, how do you know which ones are received, which ones are delivered? You need these links. So this shows an error of a mismatched link. So just an example of the kinds of things the tools can do. So on the next slide, you'll see that in the test plan document, we have everything in one document to make it easy to maintain. Part 6 is where the test procedures are. And it starts off by defining the testing process, so it defines the policies, the application, and finally the test procedures. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that for Green Button Download My Data, there are going to be automated tests like the one we saw a couple of slides ago, but there are also going to be some manual tests. And those manual tests require the involvement of a human and a tester and a witness. And so this section by function block shows each test that must be performed and a step-by-step procedure for how to perform it and a way to assess the results and produce a record. And what you'll find that a copy of this section is another artifact we call the Green Button Test data sheet. And when you go to certify a Green Button implementation, the target site and the tester go through this data sheet, they fill it out, and once they finish filling it out, it becomes the record of the test and contains all the results. And its pass-fail status is both the report back to the testee, and it's also the evidence of the certifiable successful test event when you get listed. So that's the whole activity of testing and certification. We are building out this test plan document now for Green Button Connect My Data. It's partially filled out for that, but it's got a ways to go. And our target is to complete that by this fall. And the last slide just shows some useful links where you can get technical and other information about Green Button. Of course, the standard can be acquired from NASB, where we developed the standard. And purchase of the standard is required as part of the testing and certification process. We have developer info in various places listed on here, and we have that test page that we just showed you. Also on here is we have an open source implementation that we're going to use for Green Button Connect My Data, and that's also up on GitHub, but I don't have that link on this slide, and we'll try to supplement that before these go out. And with that, I think that's my last slide, right?
Yeah, Marty, it is. Last slide in the deck, too. And thank you, Marty and Matt, and I apologize for my twitchy finger moving things around. It wasn't intended to speed you up. We may be a little bit over our half hour, or on the half hour kind of end, but we certainly appreciate the opportunity to provide you with this information. There's a raft more of information that many of you may like based upon what your particular interest in Green Button might be. Just to kind of summarize a little bit, Matt took us through kind of the market drivers for Green Button and the status of how the Green Button initiative has played out up to this point. I did a very brief introduction to the technical aspects of Green Data, and then Marty focused much more deeply on the testing and certification, which is really one of the areas that will lead us directly to that interoperability goal as we move things forward. So with that, Irfan, I think we'll pass it back to you, and if there are questions from the audience that you may have received either on the webinar or in the room, we'd be happy to address those.
Thank you, John. We do have a couple of questions that were there during your presentation. One is from Naveen Shrestha, who says, does data in Green Button program differentiate between micro power generation in the house and actual power consumption from the grid?
I could take a first shot at that, and the answer is it is possible to make that distinguishing characteristic, or to distinguish that characteristic, if you like. The data standard does allow for many different characteristics of resource, power, or water, or gas, to be identified. The actual source of the information is also identifiable. There's an element in the, actually two data elements in the structure that might be used to carry this information. Marty, do you have deeper thoughts you might want to share on that topic?
Sure. I think you covered it well. The only thing I would add is that we have the, if you look at the slide that showed the, see, slide 16.
Yeah. Oops. Overshot it, of course. There you go.
Yeah. You see, the structural view is on the right here, and at the top left-hand corner is what we call the usage point. And typically, and especially for the rollout of Green Button Download MyData, the usage point is typically the service entrance of a customer premise. But it's not always that. The usage point is general, and it means the point at which usage information was measured. So the usage point can be at the service entrance, it can be a sub-meter, it can be a subsystem like an HVAC system, or it can be an appliance or even a load. And there are fields in the usage point data structure that allow you to indicate that kind of information and allow you to aggregate up or disaggregate down the information. But primarily in our Green Button initiative, we're talking about the service entrance.
Next question from Paul Heitman, who asks, how tightly is the Green Button data integrated, correlated with the billing engines for the utilities? Would this setup be? Yeah. Would this setup complaint calls for discrepancies between the bill and the home calculated version?
So, let me try that one. So first of all, this was a controversial topic in the development of the Green Button standard, and the point is that they're typically in many utilities today, then it's not tightly coupled with the billing system. And so you'll notice that when we showed you the function blocks, that one of the function blocks was cost. And what happens is cost is not often included with Green Button data today because they don't have it integrated. That's first thing. Second thing is that Green Button data has metadata, data about the data. And one of the metadata things about it is you can tell whether or not it's raw data, estimated data, validated data, okay? So there's that. And then last but not least, we designed the cost attributes of the model in such a way that there's the interval costs, and then there's a total cost. And then we have a thing we call cost additional. And cost additional is whatever difference there is between the bill and the rolled up interval costs. So if you go to do that, you can guarantee that they always match up. Okay, if you want to think about it as a fudge factor. And if you wanted to be really accurate about it, we have the ability to provide additional billing details so that you can make something that exactly matches the bill if that's what the data custodian wants to do.
Marty, I'd just add two little small footnotes to that. One is that the Green Button data standard, the representation we have on the screen in front of us, has two goals to achieve. One is stability so that we can achieve interoperability in the marketplace. We can't move too quickly or we will disrupt our ability to actually achieve interoperability. On the other hand, we can't make a standard that's so rigid that it can't respond to the needs of a fairly dynamic marketplace. We had the discussion in the town hall meeting about what drivers might be moving the utility industry to new positions as they compete against each other and against new entities. Part of the driver for a green button information standard is to make sure it's responsive to that transformational marketplace. So there's a push and a pull on interoperability, on stability, and as Marty pointed out, one of the elements that's of most interest is how to represent tariffs and how to represent costs and how do the business processes of reconciliation actually reflect themselves in the data motion. So those issues are being reflected upon while we are still stabilizing and making sure that we achieve interoperability.
Okay, I have a question for all three of you, and whoever wants to pick it up. We have Joe Hughes here in the room, and then Marty is on the call. There's talk about UCA, and I'm sitting here. This looks like an EPRI reunion to me. Having said that, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about standards from every orthogonal axis that you can think of, and Marty and Joe both like those words very much. The reason why I bring that semantic is we have NCC 1219 tables in meters. Then we had the Zigbee Alliance put together the Smart Energy Profile 1.x and now 2.0. Then we have a SIM user group that's developing a standard for the business end of it, if you may, for SIM under distribution, which was hoping to connect with Smart Energy Profile someday. Then you have 61850 Lite that is really light now and is going all the way out to distributed energy resources in the form of -7-420 with semantic models. And then we have green button. So somehow we need to create a graphic that shows how do all of these things really connect. Because the diagram that Marty showed was flat with SIM and 61850. I think we need to show a little more detail in how all of this will work together in the future.
Well, here's the good news. It turns out, Irfan, that starting with SIM, there's a Part 9 metering module of SIM, and that metering module was used as the basis of the metering model of Smart Energy Profile 2, and it was used as the basis of the metering model of SB green button. So those three standards all have the exact same model of information.
Good to know. So how are we going to connect that with 61850 so that field equipment and business reporting can work in conjunction? The reason why I bring this up is Frances is busy in her working group within NIST to develop all these objects, if you may, for distributed energy resources, which we just talked about in the town hall meeting, are becoming very important. And there has to be a good interface between customer and utility when it comes to field equipment, especially because solar and storage is at that fence where the two need to have a view into each other. So if there isn't a good working model, now I know DNP has a profile, and I don't know their commitment to distributed energy resources yet, but what I'm finding difficult is that while there is a lot of talk about energy consumption information, there isn't the same commitment to, from an operational perspective, of keeping it all stable, which means create an information loop that will allow better control for a distribution company.
Well, there's a couple of things that will help there. You know, John showed at the beginning of his part of the presentation the customer domain of the and if you look at the customer domain and the information entering and leaving it, okay, that's really going to be dominated by a very small number of major information model standards. Coming into and out of the customer premise is green button and OpenADR, and what what is not done yet, but it's in the works, is the Facility Smart Grid Information Model that ASHRAE is developing. And what that standard does is just what you were describing, Irfan, as needed, which is tying together OpenADR, Green Button, and 61850 for distributed energy resources, all in a common joined model for interoperability.
Yeah, I would second that, Marty. That the efforts on all of these kind of rather disparate teams that have been providing input to the standards across the time frames and across the various domains is being harmonized. I'd say it's almost serendipitously, or at least with some foresight through the common members across these design teams. One of the roles that NIST has played and will continue to play is that harmonization factor. And if you look at, not quite yet published, but the next version of the framework for this, the smart grid, you'll see that the bulk generation element has become much more of a distributed energy resource and is sprinkled much more densely in the customer domain than it is now. I mean, in that current customer domain, you have campuses and you have, residential homes and high-density dwellings, industrial spaces. Each of those really has their own opportunity for distributed energy resources, especially the built space, the larger commercial buildings. And so I think that we will see through protocols that are implementing these abstract information models and through information exchanges, interoperable exchanges such as Green Button, that we will see the ability to have more tightly coupled control loops, although in a heterogeneous and loosely coupled environment.
Great.
So I think there's hope.
We'll run until about 10 after the hour to make up for some of the time in between the two events, so I apologize for that delay. There are a couple of good questions coming up. They're both online, and Joe Hughes is about to share his thoughts. Just wanted to say regarding all these standards, I think it's more important to have the rules of engagement, as Marty was speaking about earlier in his presentation. It's more important to talk about how the Lego pieces can work together. How will they be pieced together? Then leave it to the vendors to develop the product. I think it's really important, especially since the team in DC has knowledge in all of these areas, that if we miss this opportunity to develop it and we just let the market figure it out, I'm afraid that there will be a lot of de facto standards and not de jure standards. So, Joe?
Yeah, Irfan brings up a real good point that keeps many people working on architectures up at night. We have a proliferation of standards, many of which overlap each other, and Marty's point is right on. We need to find a way of harmonization, integration, unification in some cases of standards. In many cases, this is necessary within organizations like IEC. We've been working on harmonization of IEC 61850 and SIM, which is IEC 61858, for years. It's a collision sport. This isn't something that happens with pixie dust. It takes work. It takes knowledge of what's going on out there, and then an agreement to collaborate and work together so that we can have a standard for these different environments that can work. Also, another corollary, real briefly, is there are different operating environments. You have a power engineering environment, 61850 typically in the field. That would be working with the IEEE standard 1547 on integrating the power engineering side of distributed energy resources. At the same time, you have prices and controls perhaps coming in through the other protocols over through information systems. So you do have different environments. But we have to be careful on a proliferation of standards, and that's something that we face right now. Please stop.
Yeah. Thanks. Just to give you an idea of the standards at play in this room right now, there is a VGA connection that allows the audience to see the screen. There is USB power being offered to a speaker that has a Bluetooth connection to my cell phone that you're hearing me from. And then there's a Wi-Fi connection of this laptop that allows me to connect on the internet to run this WebEx. So just see how many standards are at work. But the key thing is that all the touch points have well-established protocols for exchanging information and control. And that's the key thing, is that once we learn what those Lego pieces are, we can build any structure we want. At this point,
if I make one comment there. There was a product, a platform shown by General Electric at the SGIP session, I think it was in the fall, in December, that basically was a how do I navigate the standards landscape. And it was a very, very nice way to see what standards related to what other standards within what domains or applications. And those of you who have not seen that, I would greatly encourage you to search that out, and we can certainly help give you pointers to it. But a very good tool to help weed through this. Great.
And I think that these are the hurdles that once we overcome them, there will be a massive, a huge market that we can't even begin to imagine. And we've seen this in other verticals where there were barriers, and when those barriers were removed, some of them were technology and some of them were just about business models. Here, I think it's not technology, it's not even business models, it's more conceptual. It's like bringing smart people together who are highly eccentric and showing them how to be interoperable with each other. And when I see the different proponents of the different standards, I see brilliant people in the industry. But the challenge is, as they are advocating interoperability of their systems, the challenge is more of human interoperability than technological interoperability. And I hope that with the Green Button Initiative and this fellow innovation fellowship program, that you're able to bring those very intelligent but previously inexperienced to work with each other people and make them work. So Marty, I mean, we're leaving it to you. You realize that, don't you? Marty?
Yeah.
Because it is, the real value is at the primitive specs that you talk about in your TRM. That is where you really find the different interpretations of the standards. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Okay, we have a couple of points that we want to make here. Well, Ali Sabri says, beyond consumption, tariffs, and billing, need clarification. Is there any thought or initiative about having Green Button data also share account information such as customer profiles, payment history, payment information, and other customer information that could be shared with third parties for value-added services with the consent of the owner of the data?
I'll take a first shot at it, and then if there's more detail needed, we can certainly pass it on to Marty. But in all of the interactions that we found in Connect by Data, we have found that there generally is some need to have information beyond just the interval metered information to be passed between the participants. We are taking very great caution to make sure that no privately or personally identifiable information is contained in the Green Button data streams. It's kind of one of the baseline requirements we want to keep. But while we do that, we are identifying opportunities to have ancillary data streams that might be associated in secure ways with the Green Button data streams. Now, there's kind of one baseline comment I need to make there. Think of Green Button as an initiative, which is fairly broad, and it's really about consumers' access to their information and the evolving ecosystem. And then there are the specific protocols, such as we were just discussing, that support that initiative. So with that, I would just finish and pass off to Marty that, yes, there is identified need for that. And I would suspect that as we need to aggregate weather with interval usage information and predictive kind of data streams, we will see that this kind of data stream needs to be in there too.
I think you did a great job.
So stay tuned.
All right. Okay, so let's continue. There's just a couple more questions here. One is from Jeliko Popovic, who asks, Is there an intention to submit green button standards to IEC for standardization?
There is basically we have green button. The green button standard is can be considered a profile of the IEC 61968 Part 9 Second Edition standard. And we do have a vision of documenting it as a technical report, publicly available standard at some point in the IEC. But it doesn't really need to be a separate standard because it's really a profile of a standard.
All right, very good. Ghulam Khan asks, can green button data publish data in near real-time interval data for multi-campus commercial/manufacturing sites, energy information systems that already had facility load level submetering? Wow, that's a lot of words.
The answer is yes.
Always the easy answer is yes.
Well, actually, I think Matt had a slide which talked about baselining that's being done in Washington, D.C. What was this slide? Where we're, so I think this is a harbinger of things to come, that we're seeing, in this case, data streams from 700 buildings and feeding through a utility out to a third-party benchmarking system that's municipally driven, and also being shown on yet another third-party dashboarding system. So I think that the interchange of this information is kind of one dimension. The second dimension is how do I aggregate and publish meters or information coming out of submetering systems that either are being deployed or maybe even legacy submetering systems that are out there. And I would keep in mind that the green button standard is an interoperable exchange of information kind of standard. And as Marty pointed out, it can come directly from a load, it can come from an HVAC system, or it could come from an energy manager inside of a facility. The frequency of the intervals that are measured, the granularity of the measurements is totally dynamic, and you can have a green button data stream that has surges of density in it, if you like, where you have 15-minute data interlaced with 5-second data, if you wish. So there is a flexibility in the representational standard. The actual usage of that flexibility in the field, I think, is going to be something that will be provide an opportunity for innovation as we move forward. We'll see a lot of 1-hour data. We'll see a lot of 15-minute data. We will see some 1-month data. The city of New York didn't deploy a lot of AMI meters because of the density problem they have with their metering infrastructure. But they have chosen to do green button capabilities for their customers because even at the granularity of 1 month, there is value that will be presented back to the customer based on that data. So I think that there's adequate opportunity to have mix and match, and I think my first answer of yes was yes. Okay.
So the next question is, how many people program in ADA, a government standard? I'm not aware of ADA.
ADA?
I know ADA, but I don't know
you have to be my age to know about ADA.
Okay. All right.
And I think the ADA life cycle, which started itself in the late 70s and is still alive, hasn't brought itself into the energy space that I've seen yet. But I do recall I think Intel made an ADA chip at one point around 1979, 1980. So ADA is still alive. I've not seen it in any of the implementations I've been around in the last 2-3 years in the energy space.
Okay, so then there is another question here from Paul Heitman. Says, will transactions within transactive energy be a structured part of the record of green button data?
Yeah, actually, it's the inverse, Paul. The OpenADR Profile 2, which is the signaling part of transactive energy, has a feedback mechanism for reporting back what happened, and one of the options for that is green button. So you might say that green button data can be found inside of transactive energy as opposed to the other way around.
Okay, next question we have from Stephen Northover. Can we learn more about what Texas has done and the impact so far?
Well, yes, we need to learn more about it.
Do their own thing.
Well, I think no. Texas has made a bold step forward, both in the way they are approaching their infrastructure and the way they're approaching their markets and their policies. I think that there's a massive amount to learn from that experiment, and we have distribution companies and we have retail companies that are providing services and opportunities for savings to the customers, and I think that whole competitive experience is something that we are still learning from. So if you look at the Texas Smart Meter Centralized Repository, it doesn't cover all the state of Texas, but I think up in Ontario we have a similar architecture with the MDMR system that's a centralized meter data management system for the AMI rollouts up there. We are seeing some advantages, I think, or we could learn from those lessons with respect to the cost effectiveness of some of the infrastructure, the informational infrastructures. I think there are other lessons about the dangers of resiliency in terms of concentrations of that kind of infrastructure. So I think it's going to be a lessons learned experience that not only in Texas, but California, I think, is now on the front edge of that. And even other parts of the country, municipalities now are finding that they also can benefit from more flexible approaches to their markets and businesses.
Okay, well, at this point, I'd like to bring this webinar and seminar to a close. I want to thank our host here, Barbara Judge, and Rich especially. I want to give a special shout out to Rich, because he has provided tremendous innovation in the IT of the room in order to make all of this happen. And I get to use his laptop instead of mine. So thank you, Rich, for coming in and helping us out with that. And Barbara, for the hospitality. The food was amazing. There's still some brownies left. I wish I could send them. Voice over IP hasn't developed to that level where I can send little morsels in packets of 1,500 bytes. But it has been an incredible experience here in Fremont, and I'm hoping to come and visit again and bring other challenging topics like the one we have. Key thing to remember is green button is going to be as good as you make it to be. Your innovation, your contribution, your participation is going to make it happen. By itself, it's just nothing but, as Marty said, some metadata structures, some rules of engagement. But it's really the vendor community that needs to get involved and bring their innovation. It's the energy service companies that need to get involved to create a win-win situation with regional utilities. And it's for the customers to really make use of that data to improve their lives. The cost of electricity is going to rise. There is no doubt about that. Right now, the way we are paying for electricity compared to other industrialized societies and developing countries, we really have it good. I travel, I know what my relatives are paying in other countries. So it is going to rise. The question is, how fast is it going to rise? EPRI did some studies on that and said if we use some innovation in certain ways of generating electricity and consuming it, we could reduce some of that increase that is anticipated. So innovation, location, and working together. That's what it's all about. The Smart Grid Educational Series is just a forum to help you bring people of different thoughts together to debate these things. This is not, as we said in the town hall meeting, this is not an existentialist war. Everyone is going to survive. The question is, how well will we thrive? To borrow Kaiser Permanente's term, we will have to thrive together. So thank you again for participating. And at this time, I'm going to bring this recording to a stop. and the meeting to a close. So with that, thank you all for participating.